Good afternoon and welcome to the Town of Ayer Executive By Board meeting for Thursday, March 25th, 2021 at 2 p.m. This is an open session remote participation meeting. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, Governor Baker issued an emergency order temporarily suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Public bodies otherwise governed by the OML are temporarily relieved from the requirement that meetings be held in public places open and physically accessible to the public, so long as measures are taken to ensure public access to the body's deliberations through adequate alternative means. This meeting will be broadcast live on Channel 8 and on Zoom. The public may participate remotely by following the call-in information on the bottom of the live broadcast screen. For the Zoom meeting information relating to remote participation, please contact Carly Antonellis, Assistant Town Manager, at atm@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8220 prior to the meeting. The members of the Executive By Board that are present this afternoon's meeting, Mr. Scott Hood, a Select Board member, Mr. Pat Diamond, Chair of the Finance Committee, Ms. Barbara Tierney, the Treasurer Tax Collector for the town. I'm Robert Pomperian, the Town Manager. Ms. Lisa Gabri, the Finance Manager, and Ms. Carly Antonellis are absent this afternoon. The agenda, just for the public's benefit after the call to order, will be the approval of the meeting minutes from February 18th, an FY21 budget CARES funding update, an FY22 draft omnibus budget update and discussion, the 2020 annual town meeting warrant financial articles review, a discussion on the ASRSD high school field project and future planning for the elementary school project, any new business, the scheduling of the next meeting, and then adjournment. And if there are any members of the public, when we get through the agenda items or have a question during the agenda items, just indicate so and we'll recognize you. So with that,
Robert, I would like to make a motion that we approve the previous meeting minutes.
okay. A motion's been made to approve the meeting minutes from February 18th, which I sent out.
I'll second.
Second. Any discussion? Seeing none, our roll call, Scott Hood,
Aye.
Barbara Tierney,
Aye.
Pat Diamond,
Aye.
and Robert Pomperian says aye, so 4-0. The minutes are approved.
Robert, I do have one question.
Yeah.
Do you ever wake up in the middle of the night finding yourself reciting the governor's edict as far as open meeting law?
Yes.
I bet you do.
It's been a long year, but we're doing okay.
Yeah, we are.
Okay, in terms of the FY21 budget and the CARES funding update, and Lisa isn't here this afternoon, but in talking with her yesterday, the FY21 budget again remains in good shape, which is good. There's been no major changes, if you will. There was a reserve fund transfer approved by the Select Board, which I know is going to the Finance Committee shortly for review and approval. Other than that, we don't see any other reserve fund transfers on the horizon, but we'll keep you updated. The CARES funding also remains relatively stable. No real changes since the By Board last met and no issues there. The one thing I just wanted to bring up, and we'll be talking to the Select Board on Tuesday, it'll be on the agenda for FY21, is the Ambulance Enterprise Fund is running a shortfall, and the shortfall is about $8,000. And upon looking at it, Chief Johnston, Ms. Gabri, myself, the shortfall is coming from a revenue shortfall. And we believe that the COVID-19 impact on ambulance calls has impacted it on a negative side. It's not an issue of expenses. It's not an issue of expenditures. It's just a revenue shortfall that we believe will correct itself as we move out of COVID and we have noticed trends that ambulance calls have increased, but in the beginning of COVID, those first months, especially after July and the summer, there's been a shortfall about $8,000. So we're going to be recommending a special town meeting right before the annual town meeting to correct this. In other words, asking town meeting to authorize funds from the ambulance retained earnings to balance this out. And we'll be giving a presentation to the select board on Tuesday's meeting, March 30th, regarding that. So just to sort of a heads up on that. Again, we anticipate this to be sort of a one-time anomaly due to COVID. And I don't know if there are any initial questions, but again, it looks to be about an $8,000 revenue shortfall. Looks to be largely due to COVID impacts on the number of calls, not related to expenditures or costs, and just something that we want to obviously balance before the end of the fiscal year.
Robert, as you know, I'm scheduling FinCom for the 31st to deal
Mhm.
with the our RST that's outstanding. Can both of these RSTs be added to that one meeting?
Why don't we do this, the RFT we have, and then Lisa and I will come to your meeting to give a presentation on the ambulance enterprise. Because it's
Okay.
an enterprise fund, town meeting has to correct it, but I'd like to, through you, do that presentation
Okay,
and have that discussion.
no problem.
Great. So other than that, the only other piece, and this is probably going to be something that this group, among other, the FinCom, the Select Board, you've probably heard the new American Recovery Act that was just passed, and in that bill that passed on the federal level, Ayer looks to receive somewhere between 2.2 and $2.8 million as a result of that relief package. We're in the process of trying to get the specifics and some information on parameters and guidelines and so forth. So I anticipate we'll be talking a lot in the near future about the need and the usages for that funding. But other than that, as far as FY21, where we are now, we remain in pretty good shape. I don't know, Barbara, if you had anything you wanted to add, or if anybody has any questions on FY21 before we go to 22.
So I did just generate a quick collections report before the meeting,
Mhm.
and we're still running pretty well on track to our norm for this time of year.
Okay,
So I think we're in good shape.
great. Okay, moving on to number 4 on the agenda, the FY22 draft omnibus budget sort of update and discussion. So we're still on the omnibus version draft 3, which everybody has. That puts the omnibus at about $16.1 million, about a $510,000 increase over last year, or about a 3.2%. The only remaining outstanding items are the 2 collective bargaining agreements, police and dispatchers, which we are cautiously optimistic are going to come to conclusion in the next few days. So those are the most significant outstanding costs that have yet to be factored in. Other than that, we're in pretty strong shape as far as that version of the budget. I do want to point out that we're scheduled to have the select board and the FinCom meet on April 6th at 6 p.m. in a joint meeting to review the budget, and of course the board to approve the warrant. So you'll get the final, we'll call it draft, or the final version by April 2nd. And like I said, the major change, hopefully, will be resolved, which will be the 2 collective bargaining agreements. Other than that, I think the budget's in pretty good shape.
I'm going to assume from your comments that the 2 collective bargaining agreements under discussion are
Mhm.
not going to grossly skew the 22 budget beyond what we've been talking about.
That would be correct. And that could also explain why we're coming right down to the wire as we hold tight.
I
So
figured that. Okay, good, great.
related to that, and what I wanted to talk briefly with the buy board about, and I'm going to just use the shared screen. I have 3 quick slides, is we wanted to discuss the recommended uses of free cash for the FY22 budget. And thank you, Cindy, for putting that up. This year, as I said before, the certification of free cash was greatly delayed by the Department of Revenue due to COVID. So it came in very late. In fact, I think the certification came in maybe the night before we did the second budget presentation, because normally before the second budget presentation, the buy board would have weighed in on the uses of the free cash. So if you remember that night, Lisa and I sort of put together just sort of our unofficial recommendation. And I wanted to discuss in more detail with the buy board how you'd like to proceed with the recommended uses of free cash. So this first slide, and I sent these to everyone as well, and if you didn't get them, I can send them again. The first 2 are the balances of the stabilization and the capital stabilization as of December 2020, so as the end of the year. So stabilization is sitting at 2.6 million, capital stabilization at 2.7 million. And then the third bullet is our certified free cash, which we recently just got at 1.5 million. So those are the balances. Then the next slide, Cindy, please. And then the recommended uses of the free cash, and this was the slide from the second public forum. The UDAG, so you have the 1.5 at the top. The UDAG replenishment for the Worthingdale lawsuit, this is the final payment at $230,000. This will be one of the warrant articles. It was 3 payments of $230,000, so that will close that out. The GASB 45 OPEB, when we take the meals tax, using the meals tax and the balance from free cash to get to the 300,000, we need to use 178,000 of free cash. And that recommendation, as Barbara knows, has been voted by the OPEB board, and that's been our standing sort of recommendation. The forward funding of the pension proposal, that was approved at the October 2020 fall town meeting. If you remember, Mr. Johnston made a presentation that if we forward fund the pension in 2 payments of 300,000 over the life of the pension assessment, we would realize a savings of about 1.4 to 1.6 million. So this would be the second payment of that, the 300,000. Then the compensated absences, the town meeting created adopted the statute to create, this is for balances, separation from the town, whether it's retirements, largely retirements, that we're able to fund them from this special fund as opposed to taking it out of the departmental budgets. And we're recommending 50,000 for that. And in talking with Ms. Gabri, assuming town meeting approves this 50,000, if we do one more payment of 50,000, we believe that then that fund will be substantial, will be appropriately funded for compensated balances moving forward. And then the capital stabilization was 790,000 and the balance in 5,607. So this was sort of, which I'll go to the third slide, which is the last one, Cindy, to talk. So again, if you look at the top budget, the omnibus budget's at 16.1 million. Per the financial policies, the stabilization should strive to be a minimum of 7% of the operating revenue, which would be, if we were 7%, it would be 1.1 million for FY22. As this board knows, because you guys have all worked hard on this, we've actually reached and exceeded sort of the stabilization balance, which is a good thing. And we haven't had to tap stabilization. So we maintain a healthy stabilization balance. And as this board knows, the last several years, because we exceed the balance in the stabilization, we've been increasing the capital stabilization in preparation for any significant capital emergencies and or future capital needs, because we all know that the capital can be significant, a huge water main break or some other need. And so the significant amount going to capital stabilization, the last several town meetings, we've been putting the lion's share in there and just the minimum in the stabilization. I also want to just point out at the request of Selectman Hood a little while ago, he had asked, as we look towards a future elementary school, we've received confirmation from the Department of Revenue that funds in the capital stabilization fund can be used towards, say, a future elementary school, which is a good thing. So the question for you all is below is sort of the scenario. So scenario one is sort of what we've done about the last 3 town meetings, is put the lion's share, in this case, 790,000 in capital and a small amount in stabilization. Scenario 2, and some folks have brought this up at a select board meeting, or scenario 2, we could put, say, 690,000 in capital and 105,000 in stabilization. Or scenario 3, for your consideration, we basically have about $795,607 that, I don't want to use the word play with, but between capital and stabilization, how you want to break it up. The final point is this year, unlike previous years, we don't have to use any free cash to balance the omnibus budget. So I don't know what folks' thoughts are.
Robert, can we go back to the previous slide?
Sure. Cindy, can you back up one, please? Yep.
Okay. Compensated absences.
Mhm.
So if you said the town has put 50K in there already. We're asking for another 50, which will take it to 100. And your comment made it sound like once it reaches 100, we don't ever have to touch it again. That can't be right. I mean, there's going to be some amount of dilution of the funds available as people retire and what have you. So isn't this going to be sort of a regular, although irregular in time, contribution to a revenue fund?
Sure. Let me back up. Good question. So this would be the first. The last town meeting we created the fund, so we adopted the fund. We haven't funded it yet, so this would be the first 50,000, and it is an interest-bearing account. And what Ms. Gabri, and let me clarify, is at a minimum. So this 50,000 is put in, and we do another 50,000. That puts us at 100,000. Based on what we know, based on retirement projections, and let me correct myself and clarify, we should be in a good position that, and as you said, Pat, moving forward, it would be much smaller amounts. So let me clarify. I think once we get that 100,000 base in, moving forward, it will be much smaller contributions by town meeting.
So I think what you're saying then, Robert, is as the 100,000 is reduced due to people consuming it, then that would be the amount that we would recontribute, and we wouldn't have to do the 50 and 50s. Is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Correct. And to add to that, Ms. Gabri and I want to suggest that, and I know we're sort of putting our assignment list together for this group for new business, that we should look at, when we look at the financial policies again, come up with a policy for this.
I think that's a really good idea. Don't you,
Yeah.
Barbara?
I do think it's a good idea. And just to add one thing, I was also would like us at some point to review the marijuana cannabis tax to see about maybe dedicating at least a portion of that revenue towards something
Oh,
like
that's a good
the
idea.
forward
That's a
funding of
good
the
idea.
pension.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point that Barbara mentioned, and we've been talking about it, as Barbara mentioned, that we do want to look at the cannabis money, because right now, like we did with the meals tax, I think the town came up with a good, and Scott was instrumental with this, with the FinCom, coming up using the meals tax and free cash to get progress on the OPEB. That's worked out well. So now I
Yeah.
think we need to look at the cannabis money, and we almost have what we would comfortably say a full year of history. It's been tough because Gage Cannabis was impacted by COVID and so forth. So, but we're getting to a point where we have at least some history. So to Barbara's point, I think that's definitely another future policy, is to look at what do we want to do with this revenue source.
Yeah, I
And
think that's a real good use of what's going to be a consistent, although variable, revenue source, because this requirement, people are gonna continue to retire forever. And it would be nice to have some way of funding this without having to go to town meeting every time and ask for more, another contribution. So I like it.
And also, we don't know if revenue is gonna reach a heighten, and then as more towns and cities have their own Gage Cannabis,
Yeah, you're gonna
how
see
it's gonna
that
level
big
out. So
difference.
if we don't really use it as part of our normal revenues and instead have it towards something like the Ford funding, if it does decrease in the future, it won't impact our.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, Robert, my question on the absence fund or
Mhm.
compensate absences fund is, once we see this to the adequate level, is this something that might be better just put into the operating budget at a reduced amount, say 5 to 10,000 per year, so we work to just maintain the balance?
that's a good point, Scott. Um, I'm going to say that let's definitely look at that. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Moving forward. So,
So would that be in case the funding from the marijuana sources didn't satisfy the requirements of the revenue fund
Well,
here?
I
that
think
we
it will,
would
but I also
backfill it?
think the marijuana funding will be significantly high. To Barbara's point, it'll be higher in the beginning, and then as things roll out at other municipalities, I think we're going to see a slight decline in revenue. So, Robert, do you know how much our first year was, an estimate for the marijuana?
I don't offhand, but I'll get that for the
Because I
group.
know that
I think it was right around 288,000.
That was a good chunk.
Yeah, that's a lot more than what we need just for this one fund.
Mhm.
So I think putting that towards either the pension proposal or even mixing it with the meals tax for the GASB 45 would be, I think, better served.
Yeah. So, yeah, so what I'm thinking is, once we, famous last phrase, once we get past town meeting, but once this group meets after town meeting, as we move forward, we look at the policies, I think we have some work to do on some areas of the policies, and these are good areas as to how do we move forward with this. Because if you look at this screen that's up right now, assuming town meeting approves the article, the UDAG, that issue is gone, so that won't be reoccurring. We know the GASB 45 OPEB of 300,000 has been our standing policy, but that will remain. The forward funding of the pension proposal, the proposal that the town meeting adopted assumed two payments of 300,000. So that would, if you would end that proposal. Now, that doesn't mean, I guess for the sake of discussion, we could look at forward funding more of the pension, to be determined. The compensated absences, and I know Lisa isn't here, but what she's looking at is, this is the first, would be 50,000, and if there was another 50,000 next year, the 100,000 base is looking to be, if you will, the base. And then Pat, to your point, obviously about replenishing it moving forward, and also to Scott's point about the budget with respect to this. So that's an area to look at. And then the capital stabilization and stabilization, we'll go back to the third slide in a minute and talk about. So actually, the third slide, Cindy, please. Yeah. So the question is, on the bottom, I mean, do we continue to put the maximum amount in the capital, which would be 790,000, and then the 5,607, which looks like a small amount, is the amount, to keep, with the stabilization. Scenario 2, do you want, we could put some more in the general stabilization at 105, say 607. So I just basically, for a scenario 2, moved 100,000, or scenario 3, basically any combination between the 795,000. The good news is that in the stabilization, as I mentioned, we exceed the benchmark. That doesn't mean we shouldn't continue to put something in. And on the capital, though we have about, was it 2.6 or 2.7 per the previous slide million, I mean, I'll argue you can never have enough capital stabilization because you never know what's going to happen. But we've also have learned, for example, that you could use capital stabilization funding towards an elementary school project. So I don't know what folks' thoughts are.
I think I'm all for scenario 1. Thinking back over the years, there was a conversation with Lisa back when we started building the stabilization fund and we were putting the policies together for the first round. And if I remember correctly, there's something about if the town ever gets sued, that like the amount in a capital stabilization doesn't count towards the town's assets or is protected in a special way as opposed to regular stabilization. So that conversation with Lisa back then kind of drove the building of a capital stabilization. I think initially we were working towards the 7% in stabilization, and then early on we were putting everything else into capital.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I'll offer is if you look at our two balances in stabilization, capital stabilization, and the 795,000 we have here, that's almost 6.2 million that we have squirreled away.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, we need to use that, because if taxes are still going to go up and people are still going to be paying, we're going to be building an operating budget that still has a lot of free cash, et cetera. People are going to start clamoring that, why aren't we spending our money? And I think, you and I, Robert, talked about, starting to look at, I know it's a bullet point for this meeting, what are we going to use it on, and kind of looking towards the school projects that are on the table.
Good points. And Scott is correct. I remember that as well. So what Scott was saying is, we learned that in the event that the town was in a litigation where the town had to pay, under the law, the capital stabilization funding, as far as the exposure, the capital stabilization doesn't count. In other words, the capital, once it's in the capital stabilization, it's sort of protected. It can only be used for capital purposes by a vote of town meeting, whereas the stabilization could be tapped or could be looked at in that scenario as exposure. So I do remember that, Scott. And I think your point, Scott, Lisa and I were talking about this recently too, is we have a very good problem in the sense that we have very strong stabilization balances, and that's good. But you're right, at some point, what do we do with it? I mean, on the capital end, we've been fortunate, knock on wood, we haven't had a major capital emergency or so forth, and I don't want to jinx us, but maybe as we move forward, whether it's the elementary school or the future of the senior center or some, at what point do we, and I think we need to look at this policy overall again when we review the policies too. I like scenario 1, and I don't say that because Lisa and I put it forward, and I say it because it's consistent over the last 3 town meetings or so that we've been trying to ramp up the capital, which I think has been a good approach.
I agree. I like scenario 1. I think with knowing, we know we're going to need an elementary school soon. And also with the senior center, I agree. Scenario 1.
I would agree with that as well. It's a good place to put funds.
Mhm.
It will be used properly, and an elementary school is definitely on the horizon. I can see it right over here.
Okay.
Is it peeking over you from the hilltop?
Yeah. It's gonna go right up next to the water tank.
So,
Yeah, actually, sorry, I don't
Yeah.
want, just to throw this out, Robert, real quick. I was talking with, just Pat mentioned a water tank. I don't mean to derail the conversation. I think we should look at maybe adding another water tank in the near future for water storage.
okay.
Just gonna throw it out there, future
No,
conversation, back to capital stabilization.
No, I think that I just made a note of that. I think that's something we definitely need to look into.
Yeah, given our continuous water shortage, might not be a bad idea to have small reserves.
Exactly.
So it sounds like there's consensus on scenario one. So let me propose this. This is what I'm thinking, is that we'll put the numbers from scenario one in the draft warrant. And I'm going to put this on the select board agenda under my report for Tuesday, just to discuss with the full board. And Scott usually gives a report of the executive by board. So just to talk to the full board. And then Pat, if you don't mind, when it come on the 31st about the RFT and the ambulance, we can talk to the full FinCom
Sure,
about
absolutely.
well. And then when the joint board, the select board and FinCom meet on the 6th to approve the budget and the warrant, we can, touch upon that
Okay.
again. But that's how we will proceed. And this is
Sounds
how,
good.
okay. All right, letter C, under number 4, and in the interest of time, we obviously want to get to the other items. I put letter C under number 4, discussion on the budget presentation and the budget book for town meeting. And I will be meeting again, this group before that, but I wanted to start the discussion. So the
Should we
first is,
change the slide back to the budget, to the agenda?
oh, the agenda. Yep, Cindy, thank you on I'm done with this presentation slide. We can just go to the agenda. If you can put the agenda back up. When you get
I
it,
sure will.
thanks. So I talked to Lisa and Carly about the budget book, and just like the annual town report, we are going to get the ClearGov thing off of the ground, and we're moving in that direction. You've heard me say that 1,000 times, but it's going to happen. Because it wasn't going to be ready, we're obviously doing a traditional annual town report, which we're in good shape for, and Cindy's in the process of putting that together. And I talked to Lisa and Carly about the budget book. Obviously, I think we have a good format, and we were going to update that. But if folks could take a look, and I can send last year's budget book to you, if you have any thoughts of, within reason, anything that, obviously we got to update all the numbers and the information, but anything that didn't work or anything we need to tweak on that, we're all ears. And you don't have to answer today on it, but I just wanted to get it on the agenda. And same with the budget presentation. So obviously at town meeting, when we get to Article 4, we generally always do a brief presentation on the budget. And I can send what we've done in the past last year to everybody. And again, all ears as to what works, what doesn't work, what do we want to change. And we'll meet again, obviously, before town meeting. We'll have an April meeting. But any initial thoughts?
The only thing I'll offer is, as we probably putting something in there about the policies around the stabilization funding,
Yep.
just so we call it out, because that
Yep.
is going to be a question
Yep.
if we go with scenario 1. Because the optics of only putting 5,000 in the stabilization does look odd, but we're at the percentage, and we're saving for a future project.
Good point. So in the interest of time, I made a note here. I'll send to the buy board so you have it. I know you have it, but you'll have it right in the email. the last year's budget book and last year's town meeting budget presentation. And if folks could take a look at that, obviously we have to update the info, but if you have any thoughts on adjustments and so forth, let us know. And I wanted to, when I talk with Lisa and Carly for our next meeting, which we'll schedule, which will be before town meeting, have a draft of both of those for us to review and discuss, and also discuss who wants to present what or say what. Does that seem decent approach?
Yes.
I think it's great.
Okay. In the interest, so the next item, the 2022 annual town meeting warrant financial article review. And when I met with the select board, I gave them a draft, a working draft of the warrant. And Pat, when I come to your meeting through you, I can also do a brief review of the financial articles. And we'll,
Good.
as we always do with the joint meeting, as we do, a review before you approve it. Real quick, I mean, again, the first article is the salaries of elected officials, which represents the 2% COLA. We have two placeholders. There's an article for the patrolman's contract and an article for the dispatchers. And we talked about that, and I'm cautiously optimistic that's going to fall into place. And I do a presentation and we prepare slides in advance on the cost impacts of both of those contracts. Article 4 will be the omnibus. And as I mentioned, we're not using any free cash to balance the budget. On that, we'll obviously want to do a presentation after the article is moved and seconded, generally through the moderator. We do a brief presentation on the budget. I'm going to look at the omnibus insert. I know it gets tight for the printing purposes and the comment lines. Lisa's working on that. I'd like to hopefully have this by board at our next meeting look at that too. The challenge is always is a spatial challenge in trying to fit all the information, but we'll go through the omnibus. Article 5 is the Ayer Shirley School District assessment. Article 6 is Neshoba Valley Tech. The Articles 7 through 10 are the enterprise funds. Article 11 is the borrow for the capital, and Article 12 is the transfer of free cash for the smaller capital items. Let's see. We talked about the UDAG, the 230 for UDAG. We talked about OPEB. On the raise and appropriate articles per the select board, we kept those at a real minimum because, as we know, those hit the tax rate back in November, coming up in November, December. There's a first year borrowing, it's about 33,000. The aquatic weed control, 30,000 for the ponds. 5,000 for the conservation fund. That's the fund for open space. And then there's a firefighters grant, matching funds, $5,000. Let's see. Just going through quick. We talked about the forward funding of the town's pension. We talked about stabilization. There are 2 articles from the Community Preservation Committee. We're just waiting for their numbers. There is a TIF, a tax incremental finance agreement for Catania, Spania. There's going to be, I'll be talking to the board, there's going to be a public information forum. We're working with the company on it. It was a requirement of the agreement. And they're also, per the agreement, would be at town meeting to make a brief presentation. And we're getting all of that information together. And then those are really the major finance items. So again, if you have any questions, I'll be talking with the board again on Tuesday about this, and Pat with your group on Wednesday. The last sort of item before new business, talking with Scott, and I'll sort of turn it over to him. Wanted to start the discussion on obviously where the high school field project stands. as well as talk about sort of the future planning for the elementary school. And Pat, you had mentioned, you had asked last time, if that letter of intent had been issued, and as Scott mentioned, it hadn't. But obviously, once we get through town meeting in the month, I mean, this I think is a priority. Both are priority projects for the town. So Scott, I've talked a lot. I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thanks, Robert. I'll give you a little bit of a break. So a couple of few things to talk about on this bullet point. So on the field project, the Shirley Board of Selectmen did authorize this going on to the ballot, I believe. It's just the ballot?
Yep.
Okay, so the town of Shirley will be voting for the debt portion, which if passed will fund the project, and they'll move forward with the last version that was put out. If it does fail, I don't know what the plan would be. I know Dr. Malone had put together the work sessions last year and hoped to come up with a plan and a project that would be amenable to everyone involved, particularly to Shirley, so that the funding would get passed. But there is still a lot of opposition in Shirley. Not 100% sure why, assuming these people have never actually been to the fields to see what deplorable conditions that they are in.
Mm-hmm.
The other piece of news around this, which Robert sent to the select board last week, is member Jim Quinty of the Ayer Shirley Regional School Committee is trying to gather signatures to propose changes to the regional agreement be put before town meetings of Ayer and Shirley. The primary changes are around the school committee's ability to, or the district's ability to borrow without town specific or combined town approval. I don't have the specific wording. However, in effect, this would allow the town of Shirley to get a small group of citizens to effectively decline any future borrowing for the district for projects. There is a concern I have as to the makeup of that change to the regional agreement and the impact it would have either on a future field project if the current one does not pass, but also on the potential elementary school. Because if every borrow requires a combined town vote, it is potential that Shirley could simply say no to an Ayer borrowing for an Ayer elementary school, which would make no sense. But then again, there's also people in Shirley who want a regional elementary school, which would have to be another change to the regional agreement, which has been floated around in the past year and a half. So that's kind of the long-winded roundabout how we get to the elementary school. So at the last meeting, I had asked Lisa to send me the magical schedule we have, which is all of our debt exclusions out by month and when it shows when they are coming off the tax rolls. And we have, there was a large one last year, which I believe was either the fire station or town hall. And then this year, after this year, we'll be losing the, I believe it's the town hall upgrades, which was the second funding for town hall. And there's a couple others that are dropping off in the near future, but conversations that I've had with Robert, it doesn't seem like we as a community have any major projects that we need to be doing for the town itself. The buildings have all been replaced, potential of the DPW expansion just to kind of modify and update the current building that they have that they're doing the mechanical work in. But other than that, there's really nothing. So I think that now is the time that as by board, I would like to work together after the budget process is done and start formulating a message that we can go back to the school committee and say, we, the select board, the finance committee, the by board are all in favor of a letter of intent to Mass School Building to begin the process of reviewing the ability to replace or upgrade Page Hilltop Elementary. I think the failure of the senior center at the last town meeting opens up an opportunity of, if we can build a new elementary school behind the current one, and then the town could possibly take back the lower portion of the school, and we could utilize that for offices and a senior center going forward. I think it's a great opportunity that we have as a community, but we need to really get the school committee on board. And the budget presentation from the schools, when we went over the capital planning, there was nothing on their capital planning for a new elementary school or a renovation of the elementary schools. And when I pushed the chair, Joyce Reichholtz, on this, all I got back in reply was that the buildings are fine, the buildings are fine. So I think, and I know I'm kind of rambling on here, I would propose that as a by board, because I think it would really carry some weight if it's from the by board that filters down to the select board and the finance committee, start putting together a narrative that we can go to the school committee in the fall, late fall, and say, we want the letter of intent, we're ready, we have X amount of dollars in capital stabilization to put towards the project, which will provide great optics to Mass School Building Association, and see what the options are for a project.
I like it.
I do too, Scott. That's a good plan.
I think it's a good plan. I think we get, in a month from now, we'll pretty much be done town meeting. So we get through, I know it's a crazy time. And then to Scott's point, I think right after that, this group is a standing work item, a standing, agenda item. I've talked with Scott about this some, as we put together the strategy and the message and the plan, this group, obviously with the support of the select board and the FinCom, and we make the case to the regional school district, and we start this process. And I think this is the way to go, because it's important, and we know there's nothing against Shirley, but we know that if we don't move forward, we need to move forward. So I think this is a good initial plan. Also, just what Scott had mentioned, and Pat, I'll send this to you as well, and everybody on here. So this issue about changing the regional agreement, I had sent the board a synopsis on this, but I also sent it to town council, and I should hear by tomorrow, just to review the procedure, but also to review the implications. And Scott, I saw your email on this concern about if the change of the district's ability to borrow, if the change that Mr. Quinty's looking for were to go through, what are the actual implications? Because there's a question mark there. So we all have the same information and we're on the same page. And just so everybody understands, so what he's looking to do in a nutshell, so the regional agreement between the two towns can only be changed if both town meetings approve the change. And to get to that point, there are two mechanisms. One is if the school committee, by a 2/3 vote, proposes a change, then there has to be a public hearing in both towns, and the select boards put it on the warrant. It's important to note that the school committee does not support what Mr. Quinty wants to do and doesn't want to change the agreement. But alas, in democracy, there's a second method that you can change, and that's the petition process. And if an individual can get 10% of the registered voters in either town, so in this case, Shirley, 435 registered voters sign a petition for this change and it's certified, then the select boards have to put that on the warrant. We go first now with the change. Our town meeting's on the 26th, their town meeting's on May 11th. It would have to pass both. So we're just getting the clarification on the procedure so everybody's on the same page. But also to Scott's point, which is a good one, is that everybody understands what the change would do or wouldn't do, because the way the statute's written, it's like reading stereo instructions. So
Robert, let me ask a question. Did I hear you say that either town could collect the appropriate number of voting signatures and have them authorized? That both towns would vote on that issue at their own town meetings, even if the other town didn't participate in the petition?
correct. So the way it's written, so so if, in this case, if he gets this appropriate certified signatures in Shirley, it goes on the annual town meeting warrant in both towns.
Oh, wow, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know that either, Pat. So
Yeah.
when I heard about it, it was kind of a shock, and I think more so that he's completely circumventing the entire committee.
Well, in a sense, it creates contention because you're forcing one, or you're potentially, by perception, forcing one town to vote on something at town meeting that they weren't given the opportunity to petition for or against. And I don't know how that would be perceived.
Right, and the added political layer, in my opinion, is, so say on April 26th, that's there, somebody, the members of the regional school committee, especially the Ayer representatives that'll probably be there, when asked by town meeting or the public, what's the school committee's position on it? They don't support this change in changing the agreement. So,
It's an avenue
yeah.
that needs to be kept open and explored. But I think the implications of utilizing that avenue need to be seriously considered because they could have some very negative long-term effects.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. Did you say, Scott, that what he wants to do is make it so the school cannot borrow on their own?
Correct. So it would require any borrowing that's needed would require approval from town meeting in both towns.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So that's not the case now. I was under so the school committee could conceivably borrow without town participation. Is there a threshold to that? A ceiling?
No, there's no ceiling on it. The reason, like for the field project, the school committee made the decision years ago for this specific project that they would only move forward if it had support in both communities, which is
Yeah, I
why
remember that.
it has voted multiple times.
I remember that.
Me too.
It, you know, having talked with one member of the school committee a while back, and we discussed the project, the field project, and if it failed, my advice was, you know, the school committee has to run the school committee for the schools at some point, and they have to put together the best project that fixes the issues and just make the decision, you know, and let the towns figure out how to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. So again,
Great.
Pat, I know we keep adding to your agenda, but when we come to your meeting, we can.
That's
touch
fine.
upon
I
this.
think that's a good
There you
idea.
go.
And not to speak for Selectman Hood, but I'm sure for the select board on Tuesday, we'll probably be giving an update like this as well. Okay. In terms of new business, I'm keeping the list going as we touched upon some more items today, and I've been keeping the list. We brought up some other things like a real property policy, a UDAG policy. So we'll have plenty of work to do, as they say, in the summer. So I'm thinking maybe for our next meeting, I'll send everybody the list of sort of the tally list we've been having of new business. Are there any other new business items for today to add to that list? I know we touched upon some in our earlier conversation.
None for me.
Done for me.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't have anything else to add at this time.
And then for the scheduling of the next meeting, so I know this is a crazy time of year, so obviously the select board meets next Tuesday, FinCom is meeting on the 31st. Then there's the joint meeting on the 6th. What if we did Thursday, I was gonna say Thursday, the 15th
That works for me.
at
That
2,
would be April 15th.
April 15th, the old tax day, as they say.
Yeah, that looks good for me.
At
That works.
2.
Yeah, that's fine, for me anyway.
Does that look good? That work, Scott?
Yes.
Yes, it does, sorry.
Yeah. So at that meeting, and I'll send the first, obviously that meeting will want to review the budget presentation for town meeting, the budget book. Those will be the first sort of 2 items to get, so we get that all squared away. And then I'll send out a reminder for other agenda topics. So April 15th, 2 p.m. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
I make such a motion that we adjourn.
I will second.
Motion made by Pat Diamond, seconded by Scott Hood. Roll call, Barbara,
I
Pat,
Aye.
Scott,
Aye.
and Robert says aye. It passes. We've adjourned at 2:57 p.m. Thank you, everybody.